Starting from episode 1, this is one of the best scenes in the series. Isagi's willingness to turn his back on the easy victory of an injured Igaguri reminded me of a simple but easily forgotten truth. If you want to get better, you have to do something harder. This is pretty much word for word what Isagi says. At this rate, I'll be the same as I was before, a defeated man who could only watch others, namely Kira, get ahead of him. It would have been all too easy for him to have taken the simple route of eliminating the injured Igaguri. Even easier still for him to not take the risk of missing the shot. Simply stepping out of the way would have guaranteed him going through. But to create a whole new version of yourself, the easy route just is not sufficient. Words and hyping yourself up are also not sufficient. That even includes my videos, by the way. It's built upon taking actions that you previously wouldn't. Actions that will always be difficult. Isagi's willingness to take drastic action on this, instead of just being frustrated at his own weakness, links him really nicely to the second and third points. This is a lot later in the series, during the 2v2 between Nagi and Isagi, and Barou and Naruhaya. I've always considered this the most important game for Isagi. It's the game where he learns to take pieces from other players. With Nagi and Barou dominating this game with 4 goals each, it's understandably very frustrating for Isagi. It's the kind of despair that would be very easy to give into. But instead of sitting around, frustrated at his own weakness, or being angry at Naruhaya and his luck in having Barou as a teammate, he very calmly looks at the field and thinks, okay, what is everyone else doing that I'm not? And this is honestly one of the most important questions you can ever ask yourself. Sure, there's nothing wrong with having your own unique ways and strengths, but honestly, if someone who's got what you want to have and is where you want to be is doing something you're not, you should probably try doing that, because chances are it will get you closer to that point. It's the quickest way to make progress because you can take someone's years of experience in an instant for yourself. And this is exactly why Isagi has progressed so much since joining Blue Lock. It's so much easier to instead just feel a bit of hatred or jealousy towards them. This is something I used to be really guilty of, but instead of hating those better than us, we should learn from them instead. See what they're doing that we can apply for ourselves. And what's more is when you do start to think in this way, that kind of jealousy stops being a thing. When you see someone doing better than you, you no longer think, there's no way I can reach that level, but instead, I can't wait to reach that level. As we see when Isagi faces off against the World 5, here's a very different reaction to when he saw Barou, which I'm now going to speak about in the third point, which is that you're probably doing a lot better than you realize, and also probably aren't as far off from where you want to be as you think. So remember how at the start of the series, when Team Z faced off against Team X, to Isagi, Barou was this impossible beast. He even declared, is it even possible to beat a player like that? After Barou steamrolled through Team Z. And I'm not going to go into the debate of which of these players is better, even in the current anime or manga, because it doesn't matter for this video. But regardless of who you think it is, I'm sure you'd agree that it's definitely no longer the case that Barou is this impossible enemy. Instead, the two are very close rivals, and to have gone from where he was in this episode to Barou having a whole identity crisis over Isagi outclassing him in the 3v3 is an incredible jump, one he previously thought was impossible. So when he first played against Rin and saw that the gap between them is supposedly impossible to beat, maybe he didn't need to think that. And we do obviously see later on that whilst he hasn't exactly caught Rin yet, that gap wasn't nearly as impossible as he thought. You get the idea here. Chances are, wherever you currently are now, you probably saw that as an unreachable level, or at the very least, somewhere you'd like to be. So when you're looking ahead at the next level, just remember, you've made that jump before, there's no reason you can't do it again. Something Isagi seems very aware of when he faces off against the World 5. As we mentioned earlier, it's no longer, I can't be someone like this, it's, this is the level I could reach. That's really exciting. This is one of my favourite takeaways from Blue Lock, as it replaced a lot of negative, doubtful thoughts I had about myself with much more positive, optimistic ones. Now, number 4 comes from a very unexpected player, although one I've already mentioned a lot, Barou. It's slightly crazy to me how often I end up talking about this guy. At first glance, he would have been the last player to have ever been mentioned on a channel like mine. But there's so much to say about him. In the 3v3 match with him, Nagi and Isagi against Ryo, Chigiri and Kunigami, we see a very different Barou to what we've had so far. Remember how I mentioned when he was first introduced as an impossible opponent? Despite being on the team that came last, he scored 10 goals in the first selection, a feat matched only by Nagi. In his 3v3 before this, and the 2v2 we saw of him, he scored 4 goals in both of those. It seemed as though he could play literally 1 versus 11 and still find a way to score. But in this 3v3 game, nothing. In fact, of the 6 players here, he's by far the weakest performer, being more of a detriment than a help to his team. He performs so poorly that when Isagi throws his words back at him, calling him a donkey and telling him to move so I can score, Barou doesn't have a response. He's plunged into utter despair, resulting in what is the most chilling, haunting scene I've ever seen. And you might say that just means I've not seen enough series, but him sitting in his room, depressed and watching Isagi play for Japan, looking at what could have been whilst he just sits there, I honestly felt my blood going cold at this. He has a choice here. Does he give in to the comfort of passing to Isagi, or fight to regain his place? And I do actually think he's been a little dramatic, by the way. Like, making 1 pass is not going to cause you to end up like this. But this to me is a brutal, chilling reminder of what can happen if you just allow the world to happen to you, rather than doing something about your circumstances. Sure, playing just for Isagi to score this game isn't the end of his career as a striker, but suppose he does that every game. Suppose he keeps giving in to the comfort, doesn't stand up for himself and do what's necessary for him to succeed. Eventually, this could become a reality. One small decision will not be the end of the world, but repeatedly taking the easy route will eventually catch up to you. And maybe I'm even slightly wrong about that, because it's all too easy to write something off as that one small decision that doesn't matter. If you do it once, how many times will you do it before you stop? This isn't to say you have to spend every single second of every single day just towards one singular goal, but it's worth bearing in mind that if you always take the easier route, if you always gravitate towards comfort instead of progress, you will face the consequences of that one day, and it will not be fun. Moving on to point 5, Barou frequently throughout the series shows a lot of hard truths a lot of other series aren't willing to tackle. We've obviously just covered one, but here's another. Unlike a lot of anime, Blue Lock never really goes into the whole talent versus hard work deal. And I really love that, because it's honestly not a debate even worth having when very, very few people are likely doing everything right. That might not even be possible for some pursuits. For instance, what does a perfect YouTube video look like? You might think you're doing everything you can, but chances are you honestly aren't. I had a channel before this where I posted about 80 videos over the course of a year, and at the time I was fully convinced there was nothing more I could be doing. It gained a grand total of 60 subscribers, and if I look back at any one of those videos, I could list off a dozen ways I could improve. But as mentioned, at the time, I genuinely thought there was nothing more I could be doing. But the moment you think that is the moment you've hit your ceiling. For Barou, it happened in this 3v3 match. He refused to change his ways, kept doing what he had been doing because it had gotten to where he was. He also has this sense of entitlement about him, claiming that he should be winning because he's talented and hardworking. But the thing is, if you refuse to change what you're doing when it clearly isn't working, if you fail to learn how to properly utilize your talent and get the most out of your hard work, you will eventually hit a wall, something I've very much encountered myself recently. So how do you get around this? You can look at other people, as we mentioned before, but chances are there's also probably some quite obvious things you could be doing better, as obvious as passing to your teammate instead of getting tackled. For me recently, a big one has been that I've started using my phone in bed again, obviously completely screwing up my sleep. It's easy for me to give into the urge to lie down and just scroll when I've had a stressful day, which has been every day for the last month or so, but it's an obvious thing that, once stopped, helped everything I did drastically. Sometimes breaking a habit like that requires a whole identity shift like Isagi had against Barou earlier in the series. Break your entire current normal down and rebuild it. Stop seeing yourself as someone who acts a certain way and instead see yourself as someone who acts in a different, much healthier way. Once again, the second you think there's nothing more you could be doing, you won't go further. And chances are those things lie outside of the actual pursuit itself. so improving your sleep, for instance. Number 6 is going to be a quick one, and it's going to come from Bachira, but not his awakening at the end of episode 22 that you're likely expecting, but instead we're going back to episode 9, Team V against Team Z. Nagi, Ryo and Zentetsu have quickly put Team V 3-0 ahead, down a player and 3 goals against the undefeated Giants. Everyone on Team Z hangs their head and prepares for their inevitable defeat. Nobody believed there was any chance of them winning except Bachira. Hanging your head in defeat can honestly feel more comfortable than trying to pick yourself up and move forward, but where does that get you? In the time you spent despairing over the situation, you could have probably just done something about it. It's so simple, it's almost laughable. But Team Z just gave up in the middle of the game before it was even over. You can save your despair for after you've lost, but even then, it's not like you only ever get to play one football match, or one whatever you're thinking of. Why even waste time lamenting what's happened when there's the excitement of that next opportunity right in front of you? Now, I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but these next couple are from the manga, so if you really don't want to see any panels, jump ahead to the time shown on screen. But again, there aren't going to be any spoilers here. I just had to include them because of how brilliant they are. Number 7 comes from Mark Snuffy, and I have a whole video on him, so I'll be quick. It mostly comes from one single line. Before you are a footballer, you are a person. Mark Snuffy is considered the best all-around player in the world, and so perfectly embodies this idea. He's not dependent on any one single thing, and neither should we be. When you see something as life or death, a relationship, an achievement, a career, not only is it quite counterproductive, as even the slightest setback can cause so much stress, and you're just never seeing it level-headedly, but it's also just not true. The world is way too big and life way too long for there to just be one thing out there for you. If whatever you're aiming for doesn't work out, you will find something else. And it's not that you shouldn't chase after it or do everything you can to prevent those failures happening. In fact, it's quite the opposite, that you should go all out, because even if it doesn't work, there'll always be something else for you. There's nothing to fear. So why wouldn't you go for it? Personally, I found this a super useful reminder, one that pretty drastically, immediately improved my mental health and let me see the world in a much better, more realistic way. Number 8 comes from Chris Prince, the world's number 2 striker, on which again I've made an entire video on him, so I'll be as quick as I can. And again, this one is a single line. We get a look at his thought process, and he says, "In the moments I doubt myself, what would the ideal Chris Prince do?" It's such a simple yet effective question to ask yourself. When you feel like skipping the gym, blazing around, or doing and watching things you shouldn't, chances are that's not at all what the ideal version of yourself would do. And I love this line so much, both for how motivating it is, but also it's just a great way to really gain some direction in life. With the countless different routes we can take for what we want to be, it's often far too overwhelming, and also often just not as rewarding as we'd necessarily expect. Honestly, any of my external achievements have felt utterly meaningless at times I wasn't happy with myself, i.e. I didn't like the way I acted and saw myself in a very negative light. External achievements can be great and can really make you feel better about yourself. For instance, you might have disliked your ability to achieve a certain thing, but beyond that, they only do so much in my experience. The rush of hitting a certain target or buying a new thing doesn't last nearly as long as we'd expect. However, being genuinely happy with yourself is something you get to carry around pretty much all the time. Although with a very healthy reminder from Prince that everyone has moments where that just isn't the case. Prince evidently isn't as much of a meathead as he first seems. He's given us a brilliant line, which I personally think will stay with me for life. Welcome back if you skipped the last 2. Going back to the anime, number 9 comes from Chigiri, in what is still my favourite goal in the series. Up until this point, Chigiri hadn't done anything, at all. And we finally found out the reason why in a flashback, revealing that a while back, he suffered an ACL tear. And although he recovered, if a similar injury occurs again, that'll be his career over. Since then, he's wanted an excuse to give up football. He finds himself silently wanting Team Z to lose, but then asks himself, what am I actually afraid of? Is it injuring my leg again? Is it not being able to play anymore? There's two routes Chigiri could have taken here, each with its own sets of obstacles and fears. The first of which is to try sprinting and playing the way he used to, which of course carries a very potent, obvious fear of injuring his knee again. The second is to continue the way he is, watching and wishing from the sidelines. This carries its own fear, but it's not as in-your-face, obvious, or easy to describe. Something like this, which is less sudden and concrete in comparison to injuring your leg again, is much easier to push to one side and forget about, but it's honestly far more scary. Seeing Isagi desperately try to keep his soccer career alive snaps Chigiri into the realization of what's about to happen if he simply lets this game end the way it's about to. His biggest fear of all, to never experience his love of soccer again. Since this scene, I've repeatedly asked myself, what would be worse, for this to go wrong or to never even attempt it? And my answer has always been the same as Chigiri's, as he blitzes past Team W in a scene that I've watched more times than I'd like to admit. But amidst the intensity and hype of this, my favourite part of it all is Chigiri slamming back down on that right leg of his. This kind of idea is something that a lot of shows tackle, but I've honestly never seen it as well executed as Chigiri's story. His full acceptance that if it breaks, so be it, is a moment that really stuck with me as one of Blue Lock's greatest. Even the worst case scenario is better than a lifetime on the sideline. The last and most important one of all comes from the main man himself, Jinpachi Ego. And that is that, when done correctly, there is nothing wrong with Ego. When he was first introduced, I expected him to spout some quite generic stuff about how selfishness isn't bad. I thought it was quite interesting as it's the polar opposite to what a lot of series teach. In fact, it's pretty much the exact opposite to just about every series we would have watched growing up. However, despite this quite refreshing change, again I just thought he'd spout some quite repetitive and fairly obvious stuff that I'd just kind of forget about after finishing the show. I never expected him to convince me that there's a good amount of truth to his whole philosophy, but as the show went on, I found myself not only agreeing with him more and more, but also eagerly anticipating his next scene as one of my favourite characters of all time. There's likely plenty of guys out there, my younger self included, that are just so afraid of being slightly selfish. But it's fine to stand up for yourself. It's fine to have confidence in yourself. And above all, it's perfectly fine to set some high, lofty goal that many others won't even have the courage to attempt and say, I could do that. I'm going to figure out how. And there's people who do that, who are out there achieving the things I want, and there'll also be plenty of people that will try and tear them down for whatever reason, often reasons that don't make sense, like, oh, but they're actually a jerk, or they got lucky, or it's their whole life, right? That used to be me. Only internally in my head, like some people comment this on people's posts, but regardless, I used to be a jealous little bit. But I know which group I want to be in now. Not the group pointing their fingers and saying, oh, look at this guy, but the group they're trying to make fun of. The group that are actually doing something. For some of you, this probably came quite naturally to you, and so I might sound a bit insane to those of you, but I'm sure there's a good chunk of people out there that can really emphasize with what I'm saying, that have just had enough of everything that's happened to them and want to really do something about it, that are realizing a lot of the things they've believed their whole life, have been told again and again, just aren't true. It's a bit cringe to say out loud, but my favorite takeaway from Blue Lock is honestly just be a bit of a crazy egoist. It will do you a world of good. Thank you so much for watching. Most of these ideas I have mentioned in other videos before, so I'll put in the description a list of recommended videos if one point in particular really caught your attention. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.